Mm.
Yes. I think maybe I need to press it twice. Maybe that's the trick. I just think there's just a delay and I'm being impatient. Yeah, I am quite impatient. It's a fault of mine. Okay, we are now resumed. Should we do conditions first or 106 first? Any preference?
I think probably they're geared up to do 106 first, but can I just give you hard copies of the track change version? We've done the traffic light schedule again, probably was the focus for today, just to identify where they're outstanding.
Well, yeah, that's better. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Not quite relaxed whether we do conditions or section 106 first, so whatever you've got in front of you, really.
Well, I have conditions in front of me right now, so let's do that. Can I just go and grab a pen, because I don't have a paper copy, electronic copy of this, do I? So, oh, it's all right. Oh, okay, thanks. Here, I've got one. Thank you. Well, that's a nice pen. Okay. Should we start with conditions then? And do you want to start running through? Who wants to take the lead, or do you want me to take the lead running through them? Someone spokesperson, or
can I just ask a quick question? The conditions that we're looking at, these are the ones in CD12. These are the latest, are they? No.
No, I don't think so. I think I've just been presented with, and yeah, Mr. Bird is sending you a copy. This is the first time I've seen it as well, so.
Thank you.
Well, apart from obviously the one that I've commented on that you should have seen.
Just so we're all singing off the same hymn sheet.
I think we're all seeing it much first time, other than Mrs. Kitchen and Mr. Sensical.
Yep, Mum, I'm happy to let Mrs. Kitchen take the lead, given that she's done all the hard work.
Okay, over to you. I don't think I've formally been introduced to the inquiry, have we?
No. I'm Susan Kitchen. I'm Strategic Planning Advisor for the Council. And this very much represents work in progress. There's still ongoing discussions on the conditions, but what we've provided is 2 documents. One which is a response to your track change version, with answers to the questions that you'd raised and amendments, including formatting amendments. And the other is the updated spreadsheet, just to show where we'd got to. And it includes a traffic light system in terms of the status. So you will notice that there are a few more amber conditions highlighted, and that's just as a result of obviously further reviews of the conditions. The ambers represent the areas of disagreement, dispute, both with the appellants and with the Rules 6 parties. So hopefully the spreadsheet captures all of those comments, and I think it'd probably be worth going through and using the spreadsheet rather than the track change version, if you're accepting of that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I should say as well, before we start the session, this is without prejudice to the outcome of the appeal. It's standard practice. We do it at every appeal, if anybody's watching and doesn't understand that procedure.
Yeah. So the first 2 conditions, 1 and 2, are quite standard. Given the extent of documents and approved plans for this, it's intended to actually attach a list to the decision rather than
put them in the conditions.
Them all in the decision notice. Yeah. The approved use, there's no dispute on that. In terms of live filming, you asked for further clarification of the extent and implementation requirements. So those have been added in with further clarity in terms of the detail to accompany the request. There you'll see that there is some disagreement with the Rule 6 parties not wanting any live filming at all in this respect. And the reasoning in terms of the condition includes the impact on the amenities of the neighbours and highways. So again, that was clarified. Condition 5 is a phasing plan, and as originally drafted, it referred to the building sequence plan.
Yeah.
The appellants have identified that that was an indicative programme, and their request is for that be changed to no development commence until a phasing plan has been submitted. But there are some concerns from the council's point of view in terms of the expectation of delivery of key features and key infrastructure, including landscape structural planting as well.
Okay, so does
that is
build
an area
sequence
still to be discussed further.
So does the build sequence plan submitted Appendix C, does that set out in greater detail the phasing that the council's expecting?
That shows the phasing. So, but the appellants are saying that it's an indicative, and so they don't want to be tied to it in that respect. So we'll have some further discussions on that and see if we can come to some agreement.
But we're not averse to a phasing condition. But what we're saying is that it requires more thought, more consideration about what that phasing might comprise, and we will need some flexibility as to how it's phased. But we accept that there are certain features that will need to come early. I think it's just working around those, which is why we're saying put a condition requiring a definitive phasing plan to be submitted.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, that's a post permission proposal, given that that's when we'll sit down and really start thinking seriously about how the development might be phased.
Okay.
So we don't disagree with the principle.
So principle agreed, but it's just how that condition works in
Correct.
terms of what the council is seeking and what you're seeking. Okay.
So in terms of the construction management plan, that is now an all-encompassing environmental and traffic management plan, so that we avoid any duplication later on. And so there doesn't seem to be any disagreement over that.
A mega condition, that one, isn't it?
It is a very big one. Hopefully when it's actually printed out just solely on A4, it won't be so onerous looking.
Shorter in A4.
Yes, so the condition 7, which is the Centre for Biodiversity, there's some concerns from the third party about criteria I in terms of it being too vague, and that relates to the criteria on pollution and the level of information that would be required there. So that is an area of dispute, and again we can have some further discussions on that. So site waste management plan, the energy condition 10, just to say that those are all now formatted in exactly the same way.
Thanks.
And down to really condition 16. So all those up to 15 have been are agreed.
Yeah.
Condition 16, there's some concerns, and I've realised this has still got some highlighter in it.
That's okay.
But there was some concerns from the third party about the, no, sorry. Yes, there were some concerns about the third party, and I seem to have missed the transfer of the comments across there, so I shall pick that up.
Yeah, because I think we made some comments on that too, didn't we?
So the comment really, oh yes, this is where it was getting some further sort of clarification on the level of information that was required. And so I think that there was some further information that was going to come forward in terms of who all those receptors is aimed at, and also what the phrase completed up and down the hydraulic gradient of plot 4 actually meant. I think it's an Environment Agency condition, so we were just seeking some further advice from drainage, which we're still awaiting.
Right, okay.
On condition 17, that's the geotechnical, and you'd actually asked for information in terms of what that specifically referred to.
Yeah.
So it refers to phase 1, which is the strategic infrastructure, including the landscaping and any contouring in the vicinity of the A404.
So,
Plus-
but phase 1 isn't agreed, is it? So that's
No, so that would need to be obviously picked up if there was a subsequent change to the earlier condition.
well, it would need
but-
to be changed anyway, wouldn't it?
It-
Because
it
sorry.
would, Mark, you're right. Yes.
But there, yes, the indicative building sequence plan shows that as that area adjacent to the A401 as phase 1. So this will need to obviously be updated if there's any change, and also plots 2, 2B and 4. So it's all of that area of built development and landscape works that might potentially affect the A404, that the national highways.
So it's a national highways condition.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
They were just concerned about planting and any other works close to the highway.
Yeah,
And
understood.
it's clarity around that they're looking for.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we need to think, I think, a bit further about how we can best.
How you
present
can
that clarity.
specify those areas rather than, yeah, because obviously phase 1 needs to come out. I mean, identifying the plots is, I think, would be fine because that's on the plans. They're identified as certain plots, aren't they? But then the
Yeah.
plots are obviously bigger than
Yes, they
what
are.
probably the area that you need to investigate. So,
Yes, it's strips of land
yeah.
close to the highway. It might be a new plan. I don't know. We can avoid that. I think we should, but
Or it could be
We'll see.
something like, you know, like the National Rail network, not National Rail, Network Rail conditions about, you know, within certain amount of meters of
yeah,
the rail network. It could be a condition that is similar to that.
Yeah.
Something along
Yes,
those lines within, I don't know, however many meters
X
of
meters
Yeah.
of
the strategic road network.
Certainly, I explored that with National Highways, and they didn't come back with a specific, because they said it depends on what the work is that's closest to. So they didn't want to be tied down to a particular buffer, if you like.
Okay,
But we will explore that further.
thank
but,
you.
but we could agree to tie them into a particular buffer, couldn't we?
Okay, to be explored.
We've taken out the condition relating to piling, which was 20, and that is now in the environmental and traffic management plan, construction management plan. So I do need to renumber these after that. So I've just put a reminder note in there. So the next one down that is amber is the Volvo Bridge Grampian condition. So that condition is still as you saw it in the first iteration. Since that time, the appellants have actually agreed to the first part of that condition. So the area that's actually in dispute is the second part of that condition that is linking it to the main works contract. So I think that is one for us to have some further discussion on.
Ma'am, our view is that we need to park this until after you've heard the transport evidence.
Okay,
And actually, and potentially the planning evidence, but I think that certainly we need to hear from Mr. Tester and Mr. Dix.
so the council are essentially asking for it to be in place before it becomes operational.
Well, we, yeah, put a spade in the ground, as it were. But I mean, that is unacceptable, completely unacceptable. But I don't think today is a day to get into the debate about what it should do. I think
Okay.
we need to hear evidence first.
Understood. Right.
Okay.
Okay. So
So
parked for now.
Thank you.
And 26 highways relates to having further detail in terms of internal roads and footways. And the appellants have made a comment that they're not sure what is required on that. The council feels that detailed specifications haven't been provided in the submission, and they are needed in order to provide a satisfactory standard.
So what do you want?
So I think we can have some further discussions again to maybe try and be quite specific about what is the level of detail that needs to come in.
Yeah, because
So
it's
we'll
a full
have some-
app, so there should be sufficient detail, I would imagine.
There's detail in terms of the access, but there isn't the detail. It's shown in terms of the layout plans, but there isn't then the detail in terms of the specification of the standards. So it's that level of detail, I understand, that is required. So again, we'll have some further discussion and try and hone that down.
Okay.
And make it more precise.
But these are private roads within the development. So yeah, it'd be helpful to know what your transport guys are getting at in terms of the detail they want.
And I think some of that might come out in the evidence. So again, this might be one of the matters to park until such time as we've had that evidence before us.
Yeah, that will be helpful, because I think that comes down to one of the reasons about the internal layout and the highways. So I think if we can pull that out in evidence, please, looking to advocates. Who both look like you're doing something else.
You ask the question.
You don't need to go.
You want to ask the question again, Mum? They weren't listening. Or Mr. Tester.
Okay.
So then if you turn over a couple of pages to page 34. This is the condition that requires a framework operational management plan. And condition 35 then asks for a detailed operational management plan for each part of the development. So the aim in terms of 34 was to have an overarching framework plan that is a high-level document to set out the principles to govern the detailed operational plans to come in. The appellants are questioning this and why it is required. So again, there's some further discussions to take place on that.
Okay.
So in terms of the next condition that has been
just on that one, and it's
Yeah.
probably on another one, HGV routing. It's like, how the hell do you enforce that? It's always a question that I want to raise, and I always do raise it, and I always get an answer, but it might be pull it out in evidence as well. But I just don't understand how you enforce which way a driver goes through a planning condition.
Yeah, I think it is the case of having preferred routes that can then be so that when a contract is drawn up for a film production to come in, that they know that there's some certain routes that they should be avoiding and which ones to are the preferred routes to just avoid going through some of the smaller villages.
Yeah, no, I understand the principle of it, but I just find it one of the most bizarre requirements for a planning condition. I just don't know how you can enforce it.
It is possible. There are various ways, and the way it's usually done is to, within the approved detailed plan, there's a requirement for lorries to be badged to indicate in the windscreen effectively.
Yeah.
So that if those badges are then spotted on roads they shouldn't operate on, then
Ooh, that's
there's a
interesting.
reporting mechanism. That's what's used certainly for HS2. Yes,
Yeah.
and it's also been used for wind farm developments and other minerals development. That's how it's done.
Thank you. You've enlightened me, Mr. Bird.
Well, if we could see a condition drafted in those terms, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, it's probably NSIP stuff that ends up doing that sort of. Yeah, understood. Okay, thanks.
And so the next condition that's amber is the electric vehicle charging points. And you'd questioned whether or not prior to occupation all of them should be provided. The council believe that they should be provided as early as possible. The 2 multi-storey car parks, which are shown in the building sequence phase 2, come forward before the majority of the buildings in the subsequent phase. Obviously, if there is a change to that condition relating to phasing, we might need to review that, but the appellants are saying it's not reasonable and it's not agreed. But I think it's important to have those in early so that they are encouraging electric vehicles to be coming to the site and obviously reducing pollution at the earliest possible opportunity.
Mark, we accept the principle. It goes back to the phasing plan point. And I think our view would be that each phase that comes forward will have parking provision in one form or other. It'll either be provided in, like most of it's provided in the decked car parking, and clearly, yes, it's appropriate therefore to have an appropriate number of electric charging points as that development comes forward, but it comes out of the phasing plan.
And certainly this was an important part of the strategy in terms of the energy and strategy that was coming forward in terms of reducing pollution to the site.
Actually, thinking that one through, I'll give that some more thought because I've done something similar recently for the UK Atomic Energy Authority at Culham Science Centre. We've got new decked car parking, and there's a proportion. It's about when it comes forward relative to when the development comes forward. So I'll think about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So condition 43 is highlighted because the appellants have asked the council to consider a different condition that isn't related solely to plot 4, but is looking at permissive paths through the whole of the site. And so we're currently considering an alternative to this. So I think that this may well change.
Okay.
So,
Councillor Crabtree.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to note here the evidence that I gave when I was giving my witness statement about how we don't acknowledge that the definitive public rights of way map is currently up to date. So I don't know whether there's any capacity here for Buckinghamshire to commit to updating the definitive map to allow us to resolve this and make sure that all the existing rights of way are covered in the appellant's decisions.
Is that something that it's outside the planning process?
It is outside planning control as such, and that's a separate process and will reflect the outcome of that separate process.
It's a separate legal line of work. If you see, it seems very similar, but it's not something that the planning process in terms of conditions can control, as far as I'm aware. And obviously, Mr. Bird's just reinforced that. So.
Yeah, okay. So my concern is obviously then that the existing rights of way are not being included in this discussion. So until anyone's taken a decision about whether they are existing rights of way and confirmed what we believe to be true, I think that the residential amenity is going to be substantially damaged by the fact the rights of way are going to be removed when it becomes a construction site and nobody will provide an alternative. So I think it is relevant in that sense.
Understood your points. I think it's a matter for the council in terms of the rights of way applications that are with them at the minute. So
I agree, Mark. Yes.
Okay. So this condition is potentially just being reworked completely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So the next one to come down to is condition 47, which is boundary details. And the appellants have commented that the text in red, which reads, "And the buildings hereby approved shall not be occupied until the details have been fully implemented." They feel that this is neither reasonable nor necessary, and the council believes that there is a need for a trigger for the implementation. So we believe that it is necessary and reasonable, and that's what that text seeks to achieve.
I think that's probably spurred on by me saying, is this reasonable? I agree there needs to be a trigger for implementation, but I didn't know whether it was reasonable that it should be at that point. Is there any other suggestions about when the trigger is?
Well, I agree with you, Ma'am, that there is a question mark about this reasonable. Certainly, we will apply our minds to a different trigger, because I don't think the trigger that proposed by the council is reasonable.
We'll have some further discussions on that.
Okay, thank you.
The other area of dispute is condition 48 in terms of the detailed backlog management plan. The Rule 6 party have made some suggestions with some changes, and I've set that out in the spreadsheet. And they're seeking that each production that's going to use the backlog should be required to provide an individual backlog management plan. I think both the appellants and ourselves feel that that is quite onerous and unreasonable, and the requirement to notify residents in the suggested condition would not be enforceable. We wouldn't be able to find out whether someone had actually received a letter or not in that respect on that. But I don't know whether or not there's any input from the Rule 6 parties that they wish to make.
Obviously, we put forward these suggestions because we think that they are useful for protecting the residential amenity. I struggle slightly with the idea that it's not worth trying to do something because you can't check whether or not it's been done. So we put in all the points that we think would be useful. And ultimately, I think we probably don't have the power to enforce them. So yeah, if the other parties don't agree, then I accept that.
Thank you. So I presume you're aware, but you might not be. Conditions need to meet 6 tests, and one of those is enforceability. And if it doesn't meet all of the 6 tests, then you can't use it as a condition. So I'll have a think about that, obviously, and the council and appellants are discussing it as well in terms of finalising it. But in terms of being able to prove that the residents have been notified is potentially unenforceable by the so it's got to be enforceable by the council. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think for yes, I think for us the main thing is if we can get something better anyway than what is currently there, and if some thinking can be done to tighten that up and try and make the backlog management plan, I suppose, do all the legwork it's supposed to do, and if we can get to something with some further thinking beyond what we currently have, that's kind of, I think, what we would appreciate and sort of what our position is on it.
Okay. Can the council and the appellant have a think about that in terms of tightening it up slightly or making it a bit better for the amenities?
Well, we can, but maybe the Rule 6 party ought to come up with its own suggestion that does meet the tests.
Okay.
And we'll think about that.
Can you help with that, Miss Nevin? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. We shall move on.
Sorry, that it thinks meets the test, and then we can take a view about whether they do meet the test.
Yeah, understood.
If you
Yeah.
see what I mean, Ma'am.
So the next condition is condition 49, and this requires that no part of the development should be occupied until confirmation has been provided, and this is on the Thames Water condition about foul water network upgrades and connections. And the Rule 6 party feel that this should be a pre-commencement condition, rather than a preoccupation condition. The appellants have stated that they would resist a no development trigger. The council's position is that a pre-commencement condition isn't necessary, as the upgrades could be carried out during the construction of the film studios leading up to the first occupation, so that it could actually be happening in tandem.
Mhm.
So it's just ensuring that there's no occupation until that is in place, and it's the occupation that will then generate the waste to the foul water system.
Understood. What have Thames Water said? Because I presume it's their suggested condition.
It's their suggested condition. We haven't gone back to them
But they were
to ask.
Preoccupation.
Yeah.
Okay, understood. Anything from the Rule 6 on that?
Yes, that's fine with us. Thank you.
You're happy with it being as it is suggested, rather than it being pre-commencement?
Yeah, we would have preferred it to be pre-commencement, but preoccupation is also largely satisfactory.
It does the same job, essentially. Okay.
I think one caveat to that is I think it helps to understand from the such authority, whether there's any capacity in the current system. Are they saying there's no capacity, or can we occupy some of the scheme prior to any work's been completed? It's not clear, I don't think, from their consultation response, is it? As to whether there is any capacity in the system. I mean, we're getting these conditions all the time, all over the country at the moment from
Standard
statutory authorities.
Yeah.
The easy route for them is to say no occupation until, but that only works if there is no capacity whatsoever in the system currently, or it's only appropriate if there's no capacity in the system currently.
I think my understanding from Thames Water is that they require this because obviously they don't have a full list of developments that are coming forward in the pipeline that might actually take that capacity up at an intervening period. So this just safeguards it at that point to ensure, if it is the case that there's at that time that there's further discussions with Thames Water, then obviously the appellants have got the ability to vary that condition under section 73.
Okay, understood. I think it does need to be preoccupation, and I think it does what it needs to do in terms of, if you don't need to do upgrades, then you don't need to do them, do you? It doesn't tell you have to do upgrades.
True.
It's just saying that you need to work out whether there are upgrades needed. Okay, right. Next one then. Are we
That's it.
there? We're there.
So what, Mum, we're there, and we will have further discussions and hopefully try and turn as many as those ambers into green so that it limits any further discussion.
Excellent. Super. Thank you. Okay. 106. Am I working on the most up-to-date version, which is the one that was sent to me yesterday?
Please.
Yeah. Which one do you want me to have open, the bilateral or the unilateral?
Well, I would say you don't need to open the unilateral. I can tell you about the unilateral.
Okay.
And you can then form your own view if you want to look at it. If you
Mike.
Sorry. Is that better? Thank you. Sorry.
It's okay.
The critical point in the unilateral is in the recitals under O, where the document confirms that the council and owners acknowledge and accept that the measures secured pursuant to the undertaking are not material to the grant of planning permission.
Sorry, where?
And
Which one are you in?
I'm in the unilateral.
You're in the unilateral. Okay.
Can we, excuse me,
Hello.
just making sure we're going to start the 106 session with the normal proviso that this is without prejudice
Yeah.
and
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
thank you, thank you.
This is without prejudice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I did say that earlier, didn't I?
We
You
did, but
did.
it was for the conditions, but I wanted to make sure we.
It's also for the 106
Yeah.
as well. Yes, of course.
And also, we didn't formally introduce ourselves. I don't know whether you need us to do that or you know who we are.
I mean, I know who you are, but you can
Yeah.
form, yes, but let's do it for the
Well,
purpose of the live stream.
My name's Stuart Andrews. I'm a partner at Evershed Sutherland. I'm the instructing solicitor to the appellant team.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews.
Thank you. And Laura Lee Briggs, solicitor for Buckinghamshire Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. So we are on the unilateral first. Was that what you said? Have that one open.
Yeah, that was last provided dated the 24th.
Yeah. Okay. I've
Yeah.
got it.
And I'm taking you to page 2 on the recital O. It's recitals A to O, the last recital, which confirms that the council and the owners acknowledge and accept the measures secured in the undertaking and not material to the grant of planning permission.
Hang on. I was in the wrong one. They both got similar names.
Yeah,
No, I don't.
sorry.
No, hang on. 1 second. I don't seem to have I've got one dated the 24th open and one dated the 30th, but they both don't have an O in them.
Yeah.
On the ones I've got.
Well, the 24th you probably got open is the one that has the Rule 6 parties comments in it on the 106 agreement.
So I've got Marlow Film Studios draft section 106 agreement 24.1.25 CN comments and ES response.
Yeah, that's the version I provided yesterday, which has my comments in response to the Rule 6 parties observations on the 106 agreement.
Okay, so that's the one. That's the.
So that's 106 again.
And then the other one.
Unilateral was provided at or around the 24th.
Sorry, I thought
No,
I thought the two documents that I got yesterday, one was the
No.
unilateral, one was the bilateral. So I've opened them both up and then couldn't
Yeah,
see provision
sure.
O. Right, so I'm going back to
the one previously provided. And I must apologise because I've been sending versions through as we've been dealing with things iteratively, and I can accept that that's caused some confusion. So I apologise for that.
that's okay. I have not looked at them, so I've just waited until this session.
And generally, that's my experience. Like and Mrs. Briggs' experience, we go to great efforts to produce refined and beautiful drafting, and people don't read them. So.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I have looked at it before the inquiry opened at the draft that I got given, but I haven't anything that's been sent since the inquiry opened. I haven't looked at because I've been concentrating on other things. So
we know people get there in the end.
I always get there in the end. Okay. Provision O. So talk me through that then.
So provision O is important for your purposes because it recognises that both the council and the owners acknowledge and accept that the measures secured in the undertaking are not material and are not necessarily don't directly relate fairly and reasonably to the development for the purposes of Regulation 122. They are there, and each of the obligations which relate to, and if you were to go to the schedule, I wouldn't invite that, it's not necessary, relate to provision of priority tickets, public access, free bus passes, charging points, and the opportunity for additional mitigation are all matters that were offered by the applicant prior to the submission of the application in the application process, and are all intended as a reflection of the commitments which were made in that process, but aren't inherently necessary to deliver the scheme, and aren't for your purposes something which you should attribute weight to or see as being material to your determination.
Okay, understood.
So in that sense, you can put it to one side.
And we are back on the bilateral.
And we're back onto the bilateral.
So that's the 30th.
I'll just check that. Yeah, happy me to
Yes.
go through.
Yes.
Yeah.
So am I on? I've got two
So-
versions. So I'm in the 30th. I'm on the 30th.
If you open the 30th, then I'll take you to the and I'll recite the comments made or summarise the comments made by the Rule 6 party as I go.
Yeah, please.
That will hopefully make the exercise a little bit more painless, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Fine. Okay. So as we've drafted this document, we started drafting this document in 2022, so we're quite familiar with it, which will mean that between us we will breeze our way through if you want us to stop at any point, or if indeed the Rule 6 parties want us to stop at any point to take a breath, then do please say. So the document it follows a standard form that we've adopted in drafting. We've dealt with Buckinghamshire in the past. In its original form, this document back in 2022 was heavily reliant upon and drew on the drafting from the Pinewood Section 106 agreement
Yes,
Right.
I
as
would
a
just,
starting point.
and I would say Pinewood Section 106s are in core documents.
Yeah.
So those are in CD 10.9, CD 10.10, and CD 10.11.
Thanks.
So that's where we
That's the
start
basis. Okay.
as a basis, and with the logic that the things that would be of concern to the public authority had already been identified and should be drawn upon in this exercise. Inevitably, because we started from that position and it's been almost 3 years.
Yep.
Iterations of references and definitions have inevitably become a little bit confused along the way. So you may see references. There will be a final suite. Notwithstanding that about 5 lawyers have looked at this, there are still referencing issues that arise, and we're aware of that. And indeed, between us this morning, we've identified some additional errors in both documents that just need to be picked up. So the document sets out the parties, sets out the recitals of the basis on which the document's produced and the relevant title. The title position has been reviewed by ourselves and by the council's lawyers, and we are settled that it's in order. It then turns to a series of definitions. Those definitions have been in play in large part from the document that was produced in October 2023, updated in May 2024, and has produced again before Christmas for the submission date. The most immediate changes that have been made in the last week is to update the biodiversity metric reference, which was to metric reference 4 previously.
Yeah.
It's now to the statutory metric, and that's as confirmed in the Statement of Common Ground on Ecology that was provided last week. So those revisions are just to pick up what's happened in that Statement of Common Ground. We've made a small alteration to the bus service specification to confirm it runs Monday to Friday for the primary, and then as detailed for the secondary and for the hopper bus. And as was highlighted in the discussion, I think on Tuesday, we identified that the community liaison manager definition was missing.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was there in an earlier version. It's got lost somewhere in the equation.
Councillor Crabtree's just got a hand up, Mr.
Yeah.
Andrews.
Yeah, so I realised you have actually duplicated it. It was previously referred to as the site and community liaison manager, which is why we couldn't identify it under C.
Fine.
But the definitions are now different.
Well,
So
Well spotted.
oh, well done. And
I can see the new one that's been added in is directly relevant to the discussion we had about a noise in the backlot management plan the other day. I
Yeah.
think we need to be careful it's reasonable, because the suggestion that somebody would be available on site at all times that they were doing backlot filming seems perhaps a little unrealistic.
we were trying to accommodate your concerns, but I'm certainly grateful for the acknowledgement that the practicalities are testing. We'll look at that again, and I'll look to combine the two in a refined version.
Okay.
Okay. Then moving on from there.
Could I just raise a point on the definition of the backlot management plan? And just in the definition section, and to note it is somewhat fixed in time in that definition as the version submitted in February 2024. I just note the discussion we had earlier that that might be something that is looked at and further refined. So I just query if we should be fixing it in time there, if it is subject perhaps to further amendment, subject to the discussions that we'll be having.
Yes, because I think the backlot management plan is subject to the condition, so it's the one that's submitted isn't the final one anyway, is it? So perhaps that does need updating to reflect what's agreed with the condition.
Yeah. don't mind, I'll just pause to check.
That's right. Yeah.
Where it's dealt with. I'll look at that. I'll have to look at the drafting just to see if the drafting references the backlog management plan as a starting point for it, or but I suspect it doesn't. So I do think that's a fair point, and we need to pick that up.
Well spotted.
Yeah. The next point is in relation to the parking mitigation contribution. The Rule 6 party took issue with the reference to be called upon by the council rather than to be paid by the council. The drafting is deliberate in its terms because the mechanism, well, firstly, definitions aren't operative. Definitions are definitions. The operative provisions are within the schedule in
Yeah.
terms of where the owner's covenant to, and then the mechanism which are detailed there, which is at part 13 of Schedule 1. So notwithstanding the referencing to called upon and the suggestion by the third party that it's weakly drafted, it's deliberately weakly drafted because the full contribution of £100,000 may not be payable. It's a derived contribution, and the mechanism,
Yeah.
direct commitment, is dealt with at part 13.
Understood.
I've added in a definition of reasonable endeavours. In general terms, actually, when it comes to 106 drafting, I don't put reasonable endeavour definitions in. But as it's been raised as a point of uncertainty by the Rule 6 party, I thought I'd put the full definition in, which is pretty much my standard where it's been asked for. I note the point about the site and community liaison manager, and we'll pick that up. The other point in reflection of what you've read before, and what you have in front of you, is on page 15, between the SUD scheme and surety, the sustainable transport contribution, the sustainable transport measures has been deleted. And that's at the direction of the highways officer, who suggested because they're off-site highway works, they should form part of the schedule of highway works at Schedule 3, and they've been added as 2 additions at the back end of that.
Right.
Which we don't have any objection to, and seems perfectly logical from our point of view. The traffic mitigation contribution is the only contribution still to be defined, and that's with the council for the moment to confirm.
Currently being costed, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, understood.
But we don't foresee that as a problem. But it's for our purposes, between us, it's the only outstanding point, which at day 8 of a long inquiry is a pretty good place to be, we think.
It is actually.
Yeah, very much so. The travel plan monitoring report next is highlighted by the Rule 6 parties as concern, because the refers to during the previous 12 months. And sorry about that.
It's okay.
I don't know if the Rule 6 party want to talk to the point, but I've been back to the highway engineer. I've spoken to the council. Allowing for 12 months is a standard form of structure. From first occupation, obviously there's a need to have a level of generation of activity within the site, which will be relatively low in the early stages, to then have something to measure against rather than carrying out travel plan monitoring arrangements when really haven't had enough time for it to take effect and for patterns and behaviours to start to establish themselves. So that's why it's written in that form, and that's common between ourselves and the council.
Councillor Crabtree.
Yeah, I'm conscious that we haven't had the traffic evidence yet, but we feel quite strongly that this is not adequate to protect local people and their ability to park on their streets and maintain the residential amenity they have at the moment. So
what's the Rule 6 looking for?
well, we had talked about potentially quarterly assessments, or some kind of system by where if problems are identified, that the frequency is increased rather than leaving it another 12 months before reassessing.
Thoughts about,
We've got some fairly draconian measures here in terms of car parking monitoring. The scale of car parking monitoring is fairly significant in the scheme of things, and that's deliberate, with a recognition that off-site car parking is a concern of local residents and a concern for the council. And we looked at measures to try and make that as forceful as possible. Again, incidents of small events within short periods can generate a response which is disproportionate, and TRO measures relating to off-street parking is a significant measure, and it's best to make a proportionate and reasoned judgment on the level of parking, which isn't associated with short-term events, but there's a recognition of a pattern, and that's why we've put it to a 12-month period for the travel plan measures. Firstly, obviously there is a car parking monitoring structure which is distinct from that in any event.
yeah, that's what I was just about to say.
Yeah.
This is just the travel plan, isn't
Exactly,
it?
yeah.
So,
I'd say this is just the travel plan. This is
Yeah.
our, this is our standard travel plan provision within our travel plan
Mm.
team at the council. But there is an interaction here between travel plans and the TRO process for the car parking. So perhaps that's something I can discuss with our highways officers to make sure that that interaction is appropriate.
yeah, and there's normally a travel plan monitoring person, isn't there? So
Yes.
whilst this is 12 months for the actual reports, essentially, surely, you know, if the parish council were to feed back to the travel plan coordinator that there was an issue with the site, then, or with the council, I'm assuming that the council would interact with that and start to pick it up.
Correct. And perhaps put forth another monitoring period. Yes.
Okay. Right. 12 months is normal, from my experience of travel plans, for a monitoring period, but I understand your concerns. I think there are other areas where, for example, the car parking and the TROs that will deal with that quite differently, whereas the travel plan really is looking at how to make people reduce their, car usage, and focusing on that rather than where they're actually going to park. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you. My concern is that this is not a standard situation. So obviously there's a lot more evidence still to come forward. So the council's saying that it's going to be governed by standard practices. I would say that this is an abnormal situation, and actually the gentleman has referred to the fact that you don't want to get abnormal results. I would have thought collecting more data more frequently would actually give a better and more accurate result, and they would perhaps welcome that. But I'm happy to leave it with the council to deal with.
Okay. Maybe it's something we pick up when we've heard the transport evidence as well.
And I'd also point out there's a modal, the modal share incentive scheme would also be picking up on those elements. So again, it's perhaps in consultation with my highways officer, making sure that those are all interacting.
Yeah, because it's obviously
Possibility.
quite a big
Yeah.
commitment for a modal share drop. So
Yeah.
that, it does need to be monitored effectively to ensure that that's being achieved. Okay.
Certainly have no objection to that. So then moving on and stepping out of the definitions, we're then into boilerplate provisions, which excite me and usually disappoint others. So I will move forward through that if that's okay.
Yeah, is your mic on? I
Yeah.
can hear you fine, but I'm just not sure if it's,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, it's picking you up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm trying to find something exciting to tell you about the boilerplate provisions, but even I'm struggling. Yeah, I'm not that guy. And then we move into the schedule, and the schedule is separated into 13 parts. We start with the travel plan provisions, which were mentioned a moment ago. And again, the Rule 6 party have comments on that. Firstly, by reference to annual travel plan monitoring reports. And again, I think the concern that should be more frequent. And our comments in response that this relates to travel plan measures and the survey work relating to car parking is dealt with in part 13. So it's the same point.
Same points we've just talked about, yeah.
before. And similarly at paragraph 3 or part 1, the issue about carrying out initial survey work within the 3 months. And again, the confirmation from us that this relates to the travel plan targets and the measures there rather than the car parking elements. Those mechanisms, just to briefly go through them, deal with the provision of a travel plan, deal with travel plan monitoring reports for an initial period of 5 years. And then if there are continued issues in meeting the travel plan targets, the extension of it by a further 5 years. The section then at 8 goes on to deal with the provision of bus stops and the provision of the bus service, and then a mechanism for monitoring and review of the bus service. There's been some concerns raised by the authority as to that mechanism of review, and a late change from the version you've seen before at paragraph 12 includes now for the re-establishment of the bus service if the further assessment draws out the need to restore back if in the event there's an agreement that it should in some way be reduced. Then at 14, there's the issue relating to the function of the traffic expert, again relating back to the bus service provision, and a comment from the Rule 6 parties that this should include invitation for written representations. This is 14A, written representations from the owners and the council, and the concern that the community liaison group, which would include parish, should be included in that, and we've made that addition. I think the suggestion was community representatives through the community liaison group, but obviously probably better to home it down to the community liaison group.
Okay.
Then at part 2, we get into modal shift and the operational management plan. Here then is elements relating to commitments to the modal share incentive scheme, and then a mechanism in acknowledgement if there's issues with that being effective in achieving modal shift, and that there is an issue creating a breach of the threshold trip generation, which is tabled. We would then invoke the operational management plan, which puts in place more prescriptive arrangements relating to access and egress from the site in terms of contractual obligations and controlling the gate at the site, to try and manage again and bring us back into the modal shift target. So it's a secondary measure. Then at part 3, we deal with the existing extant consents for landfill, mineral extraction and operational works, and just in reconciliation of that on the commencement of development, that one is lost. Leaving aside hillside and whether that does that anyway, but there's no harm in confirming the position.
Belt and braces.
Yeah, belt and braces. Then 4 is deliberately left blank because that was where the sustainable transport contribution was, and to be blunt, I couldn't be bothered to renumber the whole document. And then part 5 deals with highway works and footpaths and cycleways, and much of that, and this is standard drafting, which I've taken from another agreement which we did some time ago, relating to highway work delivery programs, and then the content of Schedule 3. Identifying the programme of specific off-site highway works from the junction to off-site cycleways, footpaths, and actually not actually those, but other elements of off-site highway works which might involve curb alignments and such like. There's a proviso added at 1.4 into 1.5 relating to a potential payment of a contribution, which is a late addition to the version you would have seen before, just in acknowledgement that one element might then be dealt with by way of contribution in discharge and settlement of the 278 agreement and the highway works delivery plan. Then we move on to the footpath, footway and cycleway off-site measures. Those are listed. There is a list in the definition of those elements. and then a negative obligation relating to a preoccupation provision, and a commitment then for ongoing maintenance. We then get into local economic benefits, which are dealt with in a film studio delivery strategy, which is quite a broad term. And that deals with construction apprenticeships, apprenticeship training programs, and bursary. There's comments from the Rule 6 parties as to the quantum of the apprentice contribution. Noting that that isn't a matter raised in evidence. And we've confirmed in response that those are matters that have been discussed at length with the local education establishment. And you've seen representatives over the course of the first 8 days who've spoken at the inquiry. Those are the same people we've been speaking to, who are very satisfied with what we've achieved here, and the authority themselves with their own departments have looked at this and are satisfied that they meet the brief.
Okay.
As well as the periods. There's a reference to local people, which is queried by the Rule 6 party, and but there's a definition of that, and it's a very broad definition of local people, so hopefully that resolves that issue. Yeah. Well, I'm in a position of grace and not being able to spot my own definition of community liaison officers, so we're in the same boat. And then we move on to public use provision, part 7. You have to proceed.
Yeah.
And that's really relating to the establishment of the Skills and Cultural Academy, the Community Hall, and the Incubator Hub, and then the mechanisms of how that is delivered. That's quite heavily drawn from the Pinewood drafting, and has largely remained unchanged for the best part of 2 years now.
Point on the community liaison group.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to question, I think it mentions the community liaison group running for 5 years. And I was going to suggest that perhaps that could be extended in line with the group that's going to be consulted in part 1, which says it will be 5 years after the commencement of operation, which means potentially 10 years in total, because I assume there will be impact on the local community during the construction phase prior to operation. Is that reasonable?
Actually, the form of drafting was is taken from Pinewood, and it was 5 years in Pinewood. I don't think we have a particular problem. I mean, it would be easier for me if it were 10 years from the following the commencement of development.
Okay, thank you, because I'm aware that Pinewood's community liaison group has recently shut down because it's reached the end of its 5-year period. And I'm conscious that, you know, with the ongoing operation, there are issues that may continue to be worthy of discussion. And the other problem that we have with the Pinewood setup is that the council are responsible for funding the minuting and organisation of the group.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask if it were possible at this stage perhaps to commit to the developer contributing some funding towards maintaining that group so that it can't be subject to a council budget cut.
That may be a step too far for our purposes. We're happy to extend it to a 10-year period and to facilitate. But funding is another matter, because I would have no idea for Regulation 122 what a reasonable figure would be.
Ms. Briggs.
I think I'd need to take that back to our officers to see how we could cost that, or if it could be something that we could include. Yeah.
I mean, if it's subject to a 10-year period,
10-year period,
and the
we would-
council have agreed to it, then the council can't cut the budget because there's a legal obligation there to do it.
correct.
It will be my understanding.
The 10-year period, I would be comfortable with. Yes. How we would benchmark any contribution to keep that funded, I would have to go back to officers for instruction.
Councillor Crabtree.
I'm happy for somebody going to take it away and have a look at it, see whether it is something that can be calculated.
We're on the homeward straight, ma'am. I'm sorry, it's 1:10. Part 8 deals with biodiversity net gain. This is council standard drafting. There's a relationship across the condition. You asked whether the condition should be melded into the 106. The council standard approach is to have a separate condition, and then this mechanism we're quite agnostic about that.
Okay. Another belt and braces.
Mechanism for the cafe provision, long-standing and at occupation of 50% of film production facility. There's then a public arts mechanism which might relate to off-site provision, which is why it's in the 106 rather than a condition.
Right, okay.
Part 11 SUDS is the council standard drafting, and there's a mechanism for that then to be delivered during the course of the development and then transferred to the management company.
Okay.
And then part 12 deals with management arrangements. There's reference here, and erroneously references to on-site links, which are now part of the condition. So there's a correction within this section. But otherwise, the management company would deal with off-site links, the community hall, the incubator hub, biodiversity offsetting scheme, and the SUDS measures.
Okay.
And that's pretty standard and common drafting. And then at the back end of there, dealing with site management at 8, 9, and 10, there is the reference to the site and community liaison manager. I was right before I made the amendment, but I will tidy the amendment up. So. And then finally, and you may think it's a little odd to come after the management arrangements, but it's because it was latterly identified, is the further transport measures which relate to the traffic regulation order speed survey. And there's a small addition there at 2 with the save always, acknowledging that any physical works we carried out with the associated highway works through the highway delivery programme. And then the parking mitigation survey work and contribution, and then the streets that have been identified for the purposes of that survey process. And then Schedule 2 deals with the council obligations on the council. We then have a series of plans which have been agreed. Schedule 3 obviously deals with the highway works and the mechanism for the highway specification, traffic signalling, and as I say, the 2 final boxes in the table are additions which were otherwise within the sustainable transport contribution. We have a template bond for the off-site highway works, which is the council's standard, and then we have the signature clauses. And as I say, I mean, obviously there's a series of tidying amendments to be made following this discussion. I will probably pause until we've got the final contribution from the council.
Yep, and the highways evidence.
And I'll supply that, hopefully supply that with those amendments to everybody. Midway through next week, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's right. Councillor Crabtree.
Thank you. I've just noticed as we're looking through this on page 38, where the list of streets show where the traffic regulation orders are going to take effect. There are only 2 roads listed within Little Marlow, Church Road and Pound Lane. But it occurs to me that Winchbottom Lane is actually closer to the entrance to the site and might benefit from being included in that list. Would that be possible?
Yeah, just the surveys.
Well, I mean, I would say that's not for me really. It's for Mr. Hester and Mr. Dix to confirm, because I didn't draw up the list. I just did what I was told. Yeah.
What was the name of the road again?
Winchbottom Lane.
Thank
and the Park Homes development that is just there on the north of the 4155.
That list is the area that would be surveyed. So I'll go back to my highways officers.
Okay, thank you very much.
I mean, in principle, obviously, if they think that it's a sensible addition, then I'm sure that will be made. And
Okay, all done. Anything else on the 106? Nothing from, no. Didn't know if Mrs. Briggs wanted to say something. No, you're all right. You're sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. So, anything to raise before I adjourn for the weekend? Nope. Nope. No. Okay. Excellent. Right. So, site visit Monday with Mr. Sensical. Yeah. No. Mr. Laycott, who was sitting there. Yeah.
Mr. Fannin from the council.
Mr. Fallon, you're coming, and who's coming from the Rule 6? Mr. Kershaw. Okay, so if we just meet on the council, just meet outside the door to come in about, and it was it 10:15?
Yes, I've just circulated the final itinerary.
Thank you. Okay, I presume that will be winging its way to me at some point via Holly as well. And then we are back here at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 4th of Feb. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, we are adjourned
Well,
for the weekend. Thank you very much.
thank you.